Hi, and welcome back to our podcast. This week we're going to talk about letters of recommendation. For those who aren't aware, the news cycle is going to open on April 25th of 2024. And while it might seem a little early to be thinking about letters of recommendation, maybe you're thinking about a lot of other issues that you need in order to make yourself a competitive applicant, but this is something you probably want to start thinking about now. So number one, you should try to identify who is going to write your letters of recommendation. So, whether that is somebody that you're working with or somebody from an academic standpoint, but reach out to these people, let them know. Just so we're clear, you can't submit the letter of recommendation until the next cycle opens. So if you're already filling out your CASPA application now for the next cycle, much of what you'll put into the application now will carry over into the next cycle, but letters of recommendation will not. So just make sure that you're not having anybody fill out or add these into your CASPA application now. So if you're identifying the people and they want to write them now, that's probably a good idea. It's something that person could hold on to and keep in a folder until you actually need it. But again, don't upload them now. If you have already done that, then just make sure that they're willing to upload this again for a second time when the new cycle opens, because all letters of recommendation in April, after the current cycle closes and before the new cycle opens, all of the letters that are in there now will be deleted. And for anyone who is reapplying, so again, as I just stated, your letters that are in your application now will be deleted. But that doesn't mean that you can't go back to those same people and ask them to resubmit. So if you felt confident about the people who submitted your letters in your previous application, I certainly would go back to them and ask them again. People who have known you for a long period of time, these are good letters of recommendation. So again, if you are a reapplicant or if you're going to be a reapplicant, it's absolutely fine to go back to those same people. But if this is your first time applying, again, just make sure that you're not sending out the request for the letters of recommendation now. Again, right now we're just talking about identifying these people. And what I mean identifying, just probably make a list of who you think you're going to ask, start reaching out to them. If this is something they have already agreed to do for you previously, then you probably already have that set up. But just try to identify, because once the cycle opens up, obviously you don't want to ask them at that point in that time. You need to give these people ample time to write this up. Now, I said identify the people. Before you go and ask anyone for a letter of recommendation, it is highly recommended that you have your resume and or your personal statement completed. And between the two, probably have your personal statement completed. So if you haven't even given a thought to your personal statement, or you're not even at that point, again, use that as a guide for when you're going to actually start asking. It's not uncommon for people, whether it's somebody you work with or not, it's not uncommon for them to ask for your personal statement and or your resume in order to put your letter recommendation together. And it's not going to look very good on your part to go ahead and ask for something if you're not prepared. Meaning you asked somebody if they would write you a letter of recommendation, and in turn they ask you for your personal statement, but you haven't put it together yet. So again, I would wait to make that ask. So again, I was just talking about identifying first. Then I would start putting my statement together, resume together, and then once I have those in hand, I can start asking people if they'd be willing to do this. And again, if they're going to ask me for supporting information such as the resume or the personal statement, I'm ready to provide that to that person. Okay, we talked briefly about identifying the people. So just be aware that when it comes to a letter from a physician assistant, a lot of people are going to ask for letters from people that they have shadowed. And Actually, this cycle is the first time I ever saw it. I don't think I've ever seen this before, but there were a number of programs that stated they will not accept a letter of recommendation from shadowing. And maybe that was your intent and that was your plan, but it happened this current cycle. I kind of expect that this might be a trend going forward where more schools will adopt this policy, and I wouldn't be surprised if, again, I see the majority of programs saying that. Even if a school's policy doesn't preclude you from submitting a letter of recommendation from someone that you shadowed, just know that these are not very competitive letters. If you've never seen sort of the other side of it, when someone receives a request from CASPA to fill out a letter of recommendation for you, what they're going to be, aside from the actual statement or letter that they're going to upload or type into CASPA, they're going to be asked a series of questions. Okay, there are 10 questions that they will be asked to answer, and this is particularly why schools do not like letters from shadowing. Specifically, the person filling out the letter of recommendation will be asked about your adaptability, your conflict resolution, your empathy, your intellectual ability, your personal relations, your oral communication, your reaction to criticism, your reliability, your self-awareness, your team skills, and your written communication. And when I say they're going to be asked about these, they're going to be asked to score them. So it's not something that you're going to ask somebody to write these specific things in your letter of recommendation. The individual who is going to write yours will be asked to rank these from 1 to 5 or not observed. So the things that I just mentioned as far as the questions that will be asked, obviously if you're just shadowing, somebody is not going to be able to assess your empathy, your reaction to criticism, your ability to work in a team environment, and again, the others that I mentioned off. So invariably what this ends up being is a non-observed letter of recommendation. Letters are scored from each question, again, as I mentioned, is 1 to 5. So there are 10 questions, total of 50 points. But if you're getting non-observed, then it's not going to count for much. And again, coming from a PA, this is a very important one if you are getting one from a PA. And realistically, if it's anybody that just observed you, other than a teacher, if it's coming from academics, certainly that person's not going to be able to comment on your teamwork and empathy, etc. But just remember, if it is coming from a provider, particularly from a physician assistant, and it's only coming from somebody that you shadowed, it's not going to be very effective, or it's not going to count for very much. And just saying that comes from a shadow, or just comes from a PA, it's just not going to be enough. Same, if you are shadowing somebody and you're asking for a letter of recommendation, but you've only shadowed that person maybe 2 or 3 times, try and understand these are not going to be very effective letters of recommendation. Now, the schools, many of them do require letter of recommendation from a PA, but that doesn't mean you can just shadow somebody 2 or 3 times, ask for a letter of recommendation, and that's going to make you as competitive as, say, someone who's worked with a PA for 6 months, a year, or longer. And again, whether that person is able to comment on those 10 questions that I just talked about. So bear this in mind, and this is why we're talking about letters of recommendation. Now, if you are applying in this upcoming cycle, this is something to give some serious thought to if you thought you were going to get your letter of recommendation from shadowing alone. Okay, when it comes to actually requesting the letter of recommendation, it's fairly straightforward in CASPA. You're going to put in their name, email, little note saying thank you, but it asks you to give a deadline date, and it's very random. I mean, you're the one that will set the deadline date for whomever is going to fill this out. And as I've said before, if you've asked this person ahead of time, this shouldn't be a big surprise, especially if they could start writing it now or sometime soon so that it's prepared and ready for the time that when you request it. I would just advise that I wouldn't give people a long time to complete this. As I said, that you'll be asked to set a deadline date, but the deadline date, there's no right one. I typically recommend 1 week. A lot of students will give 2, 3 weeks, even a month. And I'm sure you probably know, but if you give somebody 3 weeks, it's going to take them 3 weeks. If you give them a month, that's how long it's going to take. And even still, if you're lucky at that point. I would just say myself, I'm back in school myself. I started a graduate program last year, and I had asked the doctors that I work with for letters of recommendation. And all 3 were very, very happy to do this for me, really excited for me. But getting the actual letters, and these are people I know very well. One doctor I know filled out his letter of recommendation rather quickly, probably within a few days. The doctor or surgeon that I currently work with, I almost had to threaten to stop working with him to get him to write the letter of recommendation. He was more than happy to do it. He just kept forgetting to do it. And so finally I just had to say, I need this or I can't help you anymore. And the third, who is a doctor I worked with many years ago, we've stayed in touch and are actually quite good friends, was the one that took the longest. I mean, I don't even remember. It just took weeks and weeks and weeks. Ultimately, it was his medical assistant who ended up filing it on his behalf because he just couldn't get around to it. So I'm talking about people that I know very, very well. So think about this when you're setting deadlines, when you're asking the people, you may have to be on top of it and probably will have to be. So just be prepared for this, because I've been doing this for a long time. For those of you who don't know me or know us, but I've been doing this for almost 20 years. And this is one part of the application that typically holds up an applicant. You might have everything else done because you're in control of it. But when it comes to the letters of recommendation and you have to wait on somebody else, it can be a very precarious situation. You're trying to get it in before a deadline, or you're just trying to get in early, and all of a sudden you're delayed because you can't do anything until this person finishes your letter of recommendation. So I hope this was helpful. It's just a little quick tip on letters of recommendation for the upcoming cycle. And if you do have other questions, feel free to contact us. We are doing what are called free consultations for people who are interested in what we do and want to learn more about us. So if you're interested in the free consultation, just visit our website at pamentoronline.com and go ahead and sign up for the free consultation. We'll set up a phone call between you and one of the PA mentors so we can explain what we do here and how we can help you to become competitive in the upcoming cycle. All right, thank you.